Well, there was a lot to absorb from today's nearly 2-hour-long budget presentation. So where do we start? We want to talk to Edison Sumner, a member of the business community, well known, of course. Mr. Sumner, thanks so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you very much. It's my pleasure.
Well, first of all, the conversation seems to be centered around this jump in the VAT rate from 7.5% to 12%. Of course, there are areas as well where VAT is exempted. Are there pros and cons to that?
Well, as you can imagine, we got quite a number of calls today after the Deputy Prime Minister's pronouncement that the government is proposing to increase VAT from 7.5% to 12%. That comes with a number of implications in and of itself. We need to examine that very closely. When we had our initial discussions with the government going into this budget cycle, we knew that there was a proposal to consider amending some taxes in the country, including VAT, but we never were not given any indication that we will see an increase up to 12%. So that came as much as a surprise to the Chamber today as it did to anyone else at that 12% rate. But we do intend to meet with the government. We intend to meet with the Deputy Prime Minister as early as tomorrow. And of course, the Chamber is meeting over this as well, so that we can have a chance to review with him. He's able to give us the justification or reasons for the increase to the 12% rate for VAT.
Well, the budget also included some concessions, some for private citizens, like the increase in customs exemptions from $300 twice a year to $500 twice a year. There were also some exemptions for business. Was it enough, you think, to help businesses get over the hump?
Well, the $500 is good for people like me, the consumer, because we want to take advantage of those rates. But I'm sure that the retailers in the country might have something to say about that, because it's now going to be dipping into them as well, because now there are more people who are going to want to go and shop abroad. But the concessions that we see coming in, of course, for example, in the retail space for the apparels industry, where the government is now going to be reducing the rate of customs duty on clothing, imports of clothing, on shoes and other apparels. And we are also following the trends that are happening with the over-the-hill development and the revitalization efforts that the government has put out there. But let me also say that when it comes to the issue of taxation, right, that the government has formed a committee, which is a steering committee for looking at the revision of the taxation structure. And that committee has a remit to review recommendations and also to make its own recommendations to the government of what the tax structure ought to be and ought to look like in the country. So, that committee has a remit. It has a timeline to respond and to provide reports back to the government. And we would have thought that at least give the committee a chance to get its work done and before we make any changes. But we understand that there's some things that has to happen. The government is running a recurring deficit. They're running debits. They're talking about incurring and inheriting debits that were left by previous administrations. So there's quite a bit that has to be done. But we don't think that the idea of raising taxes or in introducing new taxes is necessarily the way to go. We've got to examine our fiscal prudence, fiscal management of our infrastructure and resources, and do a better job at collecting outstanding taxes that are currently due to the government. And while we have to look at the whole taxation structure holistically and not in isolation, but we have to also consider other fiscal measures as well that the government will have to employ and implement in order to, one, reduce its outstanding debts and deficits, but also a way to increase revenue by improving certain efficiencies in systems in government.
And finally, quickly, this is the second budget communication this administration has presented, the first that they've actually put together, I guess. How long does the government continue to get grace, you think, for having to deal with, as they say, contract obligations and other arrears that they've inherited?
That honeymoon is over. That grace period is done. I mean, the government has already been in place now for over a year. We would have used that excuse in the first 6 months because they needed time to get together, to get their programs aligned, to get their feet wet, etc. But we're now a full year into the F&M administration governing the country. By now, I'm sure they would have got the handle on what's ever happening in the economy. So like any other new administration, whether it's in the private sector or in government, after a full year in operation, some things may take longer to implement than others, but by this time, then there should be a full handle on the economy, and that's why the government in this instance have been able to produce a full budget that is entirely theirs. And so we're looking forward to seeing how this is going to roll out. And again, my advice to the private sector business community is, even though you've heard this announcement today, I would say don't panic. We have an opportunity to have a discussion with the government. They'll have a chance to explain to us and to the public at large how and why they came up with the rates that they did. And after we've had a chance to have a discussion with the government, and hopefully we can influence some policy amendments. We'll see how that goes. But we expect to have some very fruitful discussions with the government as early as tomorrow. And then we'll, of course, keep the business community and our membership apprised of how those discussions are going to go.
Thank you very much, Edison Sumner of the Bahamas Chamber of Commerce and Employers Confederation. Great insight. Thank you.
Thank you.